Hi, everyone. Good evening. Welcome. Thanks for coming. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group. And tonight we are going to be talking about financial aid offers, helping you to understand them, answering as many questions as possible. And tonight's session is being sponsored and hosted by CollegeWell. And I want to introduce Joanne Daschel, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of CollegeWell and Private College 529 Plans, which she will discuss more about what all that is. I'm going to turn it over to her in 2 minutes, and she's going to introduce the guests, but I just want to do a few minutes of housekeeping. And while I'm housekeeping, what I'm doing is I'm going to actually spotlight Joanne and our guests, so it's easier for everybody to see them when they're presenting. And tonight is actually officially a Zoom meeting, and I only remind people that is because you can turn on your video if you like. It's kind of, I like to encourage people because it's nice to see faces for all of us. Thank you. I see a few people are going to try and turn them on. Thanks a lot. And this is also recorded, so we will send out a link to the recording tomorrow. You have all been coming in muted. The benefit of a meeting is if you really have a pressing question, you can kind of raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to ask. But most times people will put their questions in the chat, and I'm going to be looking through the questions and sharing them with Joanne, who's going to share them with our guests. If we don't answer a question right away, it's because we're really trying to save them to the end, just to kind of bulk them together, and also because we might know that your question is going to be answered through some conversation that we're going to be having. So other than that, before I give it to you, Joanne, I always like to ask people if you can just put in the chat where you're watching from. I imagine most of the people here, although we invited other grades, but most people here tonight have a senior. Up to you if you want to share, what schools your child is deciding between, or, where you might have gotten some offers from, and we'll get started. So, Joanne, it's all yours.
So wonderful. Thank you so much, Debbie, for having us. Thank you so much for your partnership. We are so excited to be here tonight to talk all about decoding financial aid offers. It is one of my favorite topics because it is so important. I know we have a lot of families of high school seniors here tonight who are in the process of wading through all of the financial aid offers that they've received and are at the point of determining, how much is it going to cost and how do we make this decision, which is right around the corner for parents of high school seniors. May 1st is the traditional due date for families and students together to make that selection. So it is such an important topic this time of year for those families. I'm also really excited to know that we have folks joining us tonight who are just planning ahead. That is truly the best way to be prepared for this process, is to understand, what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So really happy to hear that folks are here and just getting ahead of the game as much as they possibly can. I am joined by two experts to help me with this conversation. We have Chelsea Thierman, who's a Senior Associate Director of Financial Aid at Clark University, and Kathy Anderson, who's the Associate Vice President of Student Financial Services at Berklee College of Music. And not only have these folks helped tens of thousands of families through this process, that's absolutely true, but they have a lot of experience at their current institution, but also a lot of experience at other colleges and universities in financial aid. So we're going to be bringing a lot of different perspectives and sharing with you how different colleges and universities review these applications, award financial aid, and also how they might handle an appeal situation. I'm so glad that folks submitted questions ahead of time. That was really helpful for us to sprinkle the the questions that are rising to the top of your minds, it's important to know that so we can make sure to sprinkle those in throughout the discussion. As I mentioned, we did have a lot of questions about how to appeal financial aid. So we're going to be talking about that, spend some time talking about not only circumstances that might warrant a financial aid offer appeal, and then how different colleges and universities might suggest that you handle that with their institution. So let's get started. We're going to break down the components of the financial aid award and then jump into how to compare these side by side so that you're truly calculating the net cost. We'll talk about additional resources that are available to you, including outside scholarships to help meet college expenses, because it is so critical that not only are you making a plan to pay for year one, but for all of the years that the student plans to be enrolled, whether that's 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, or beyond, that there's a plan in place to meet those expenses and you're going in with eyes wide open. Before we get started with the content, I just want to introduce CollegeWell and Private College 529 again. Our mission at CollegeWell is to help make college more affordable by helping families get on their plan for saving and paying for college. And we bring in guidance from the experts like Chelsea and like Kathy to help families understand how our colleges and universities looking at admissions applications, awarding financial aid. We also bring in guidance from financial advisors who work with younger families on determining what is the best college savings solution, the best college savings vehicle for me, when I'm factoring all of my other financial decisions like retirement and paying for a home, etc. So visit collegewell.com. We have a number, these are all free resources as part of our mission to just help families with the process. We have sessions like these pre-recorded available on our website, as well as articles and videos and infographics, all sorts of different ways to digest the information and make a plan for you. Suggestion for families with children of all ages. And then we also offer Private College 529 plan, which is a savings solution. It is a 529 plan. It's a prepaid 529 plan that allows families to lock in current tuition rates at hundreds of private colleges nationwide. So unlike 529 savings and investing plans, where your contributions are tied to market investments, Private College 529 is a prepaid plan, as I mentioned, where your contributions, instead of being invested in the market, are actually prepaying and locking in tuition. And again, that's at hundreds of private colleges across the country. Clark University and Berklee College of Music are two of those great institutions that participate. And even families of high school seniors can still take advantage of the plan if they know their child is going to one of our colleges and universities. They can lock in tuition and fees to use for the senior year of college. Younger families can lock in additional years. They have time to do that. We'll talk a little bit more about strategies for incorporating Private College 529, as well as other saving solutions when we get toward the end of our presentation. But I would encourage you to visit Private College 529. That's also on the CollegeWell website. Visit our site so you can see the list of colleges to see if your son or daughter is applying to one of the institutions or was admitted to one of the institutions that's on our list. So let's jump now right into the content. We have a lot that we want to get through tonight. And one of the most important components of the financial aid award letter, of course, are costs. We have to start there. So Chelsea, let's start with you. What are some of the more common costs that we see on a financial aid award letter? And before I do turn it over, I just want to mention that on the right-hand side of your screen, you might have to move the video around a little bit just in case, or the webcam's images a little bit to see on the right-hand side. But this is a sample financial aid award letter that was developed by the National Association of Student Financial Administrators, which is an organization that helps financial aid administrators across the country award and stick to the guidelines of awarding federal financial aid. And they've prescribed this sample financial aid award letter, encouraging many institutions to adopt this format. So it may be a very similar format to what you see on the financial aid award letters that you are comparing. So we thought it would be a really great one to share for this discussion. You'll see pretty common terms. And also, as I mentioned, you should see a fairly common setup with the award letters that you are reviewing as well. So as we go throughout the presentation, we'll be highlighting different sections of that standard financial aid award letter that NASFA has provided for institutions to use and to adopt. But Chelsea, without further ado, let's talk about college costs and what are the most common ones that you'll find on the award letter.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Joanne. And I will say I've been kind of monitoring the chat and seeing those schools pop up of college acceptances. And I'll say personally, I graduated from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, and I worked for a dozen years at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Massachusetts. So have very personal and fond connections to those institutions for those of you out there that posted that. Regarding costs, though, that you will see on that financial aid award letter, you're going to see both direct costs, which we think of also as being referred to as billable costs, costs that will show up on that bill that you receive. And those include things like tuition, fees. And to expand on fees, a fee may be a health and wellness fee, maybe an orientation fee, student activity fee. There could be a number of fees. And those fees might be charged one time in the fall semester, such as an orientation fee usually is, or could be charged each semester. So important to know how often those fees will recur. Any on-campus housing will be that direct cost that will appear on the bill, as well as a meal plan. There is a mention here of health insurance. So in most states, students are required to have health insurance. And at an institution where I work now, such as Clark University, we go ahead and bill each student on their fall semester bill each academic year for the cost of student health insurance. But then we do provide instructions to students and families about how they can provide proof of insurance to then have that charge waived off of the bill. So that's something really important to keep in mind. You may see that charge and go, whoa, I wasn't planning on paying. At Clark University, it's about $2,500 to pay for health insurance for the year. But realize you can just go ahead and provide proof of insurance, which you will need to do annually in order to have that charge removed. So those direct costs are what we're talking about when we talk about those billable expenses. Indirect costs are a little bit different. This is typically the institution's estimate of the out-of-pocket expenses that you may incur that are associated with attending this educational program in this particular institution. So for a student who opts to live off campus, if that is an option, and you'll want to look into that closely at each school, then that would be an indirect cost, as well as meals associated with living off campus. Certainly, books and supplies are not generally billed. They are going to be expenses that are incurred after the fact and could change depending on the student's program or degree level. Transportation, either to or from campus or local transportation, may be included as an indirect cost that we expect a student to be able to get around wherever that college campus is, as well as personal and miscellaneous expenses. Sometimes students need to buy a new wardrobe if they're moving from a warm climate to a cold climate. We see that quite often. And then just the day-to-day things, maybe you have prescription copays, or maybe you need to get some, supplies for your dorm room and you need your shampoo and your conditioner. Things like that are included under that miscellaneous or personal expense, indirect cost. So when an institution talks about what is the full cost of attendance, they're talking about those direct billable costs in addition to the indirect out-of-pocket expenses.
And Chelsea, we had a question earlier, actually a question that came in before the session about planning for all 4 years, which we were so excited to see, because that's exactly what
Absolutely.
we want families to do. So how would you expect that these costs could potentially change from one year to the next?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally, each one of the schools that I have worked for, with the exception of a public community college, any of the private institutions for which I've worked would generally say to expect an increase in tuition and fees of about 3% each year. So if you're thinking about not just year one, but years 2, 3, and 4, please know that tuition will likely increase at a rate of about 3%. You can always do a look back at any particular institution your child is interested in to see what that trend has been in the past. And if you're not able to find that information, you can surely ask the admissions office or the Office of Financial Aid about that, what they expect the increase to be. If you're asking that question, then there's another question I want you to be asking as well. Does the financial aid increase with the increase of tuition? That's just such a really important question to ask and understand when planning for all 4 years.
That's a good one. Now, Kathy, not only have you helped many, many families with this process, but you happen to be the parent of a college freshman this year. So we've just talked about the expenses that show up on the bill, right? Those direct expenses, plus some indirect expenses, an average amount, right, to plan for, to budget for. But what are some of the expenses that families might be surprised about that they haven't factored in earlier on?
So one of the things I think that surprises families the most is the deposit that they might have to come up with to put down. And that varies widely from school to school. Some deposits are a few $100s, some are $1,000, some are $2,500. That is an upfront out-of-pocket cost. It does go against your bill, ultimately, but it is something that you'll have to pay to secure your space in the class, and it's due by May 1, so the deposit deadline. But for us, I think one of the things we had to buy, my son goes to a, basically like a performing art school, and the laptop that we needed was very expensive. And that is something that can be added into the cost of attendance, but it does vary by institution. We were required to have one with certain specifications, and it was pricey. So that was something. And also the startup costs, right? So what it's going to take to get that dorm room outfitted, you need to have twin extra long sheets, and you need to have all the bedding things and those kinds of things that you walk onto campus with, that we needed to have to just get him started, which was very, he's close by, but for other families, the cost of getting to and from the college can be very expensive, especially if you're going cross country. Shipping things is expensive, or if you're driving out, it all really just adds up. So those are things that wouldn't be included really in your award letter, but those are things that families do need to think about. And this is a little bit for future, but off-campus housing, you have to, particularly in the Boston area, you have to come up with a bunch of money up front. So here it's first, last, security, and broker's fee. So 4 months worth of rent. That is something that if your child is moving off campus, be prepared for that. I think for many families, it's an unexpected expense that isn't in your financial aid package.
That is really helpful to consider, because as we're talking about comparing these award letters side by side, if a student is planning to travel across country, how many times they plan to come home, or how much needs to be shipped out, could really change what that bottom number looks like. So really great advice to be factoring those in ahead of time. We did have some questions come through the chat that I thought would be good to address right now. And one is really based on timing of these financial aid award letters. So let's just talk about that really quickly. Chelsea, if you don't mind sharing, if a family has applied and have been admitted to an institution right now, if they've completed all the necessary applications, when should they be receiving a financial aid award? And if they haven't received any yet, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And my official financial aid answer is it depends, which I know you probably hear that a lot. Certainly, it will depend on what applicant pool the student has applied in as to what the financial aid deadline. And then typically the institution will tell you, we will notify applicants who are early decision, which is that binding applicant pool or early action or regular decision. And some of those have multiple rounds, round 1, round 2. They will tell you when the application is due by, but they'll also let you know when decisions are being released by. Keep in mind that really they're only guaranteeing you a response to the admissions and financial aid applications if you're meeting those application deadlines. Oftentimes, a student might apply early, but not meet the application deadline for all of the financial aid documents that were requested. And sometimes that can then delay receipt of both an admissions and a financial aid award. I can tell you here at Clark University, where I currently work, if a student indicates on their admissions application that they intend to apply for need-based financial aid, the university actually will not release an admissions decision until that applicant completes the need-based financial aid application. And the reasoning behind that is that a student can't know if they could possibly enroll if they're admitted if they don't have the financial aid piece of it. So it's really, really important to understand that meeting deadlines is important, and the university or the institution can only turn around an offer of admission or financial aid to you if you have met those deadlines. I would say at this point in the game, it is April the 8th, so we're getting on close to that May 1st decision deadline for students. If you've applied for financial aid, and I would say, and it's probably been more than 2 weeks, I would say follow up with that institution. If they have a portal where you can log in and check to make sure that all the application materials have been received, or if that school maybe is emailing you and that email's going into your junk folder, you're going to want to check for those things. If you're not finding that there's anything missing, certainly reach out to that school, because what you're doing right now is running short on time. You want to have enough time to receive those decisions and those offers, and then have an opportunity to sit with that information, discuss them as a family, and figure out what the best path forward is. So it's really important, I'd say, at this state, if you have applied and you do not have a financial aid award letter, reach out to that institution.
And if I could just add to that, typically the communication is to the student. So parents, make sure your son or your child is checking their email. A lot of times there'll be something that's requested, even if you think you've submitted everything. There are 2 words we do not say in the aid office, and that is all set, because there's oftentimes, the aid package, you submit what's requested, and then there's some follow-up, and it goes to the student. So if you do not have an award letter by this point and you believe you've submitted everything, it would be a really good idea to check with your child and see if there's anything that has been communicated from either the aid office or the admissions office asking for further clarification. Yeah.
Such great advice. Thank you for that. Now, perfect transition to get into the components now of the financial aid award. Now, since we've discussed costs, and again, we're pulling this directly from that sample financial aid award letter, not necessarily in the format that that you'll see in the award letter. I'm grabbing certain sections. You'll see it pulled all together at the end. But these are where we are outlining the grants and scholarships, or the institution will be outlining the grants and scholarships, the loans, and other self-help like work study types of financial aid that will make up the financial aid award letter. Now, all financial aid award letters are not necessarily considered equal. You can't just focus on the bottom number, right? The total amount of that financial aid award, because $20,000 from College A could be very different from $20,000 in a total offer from College B. The college or university, as we've described, Chelsea and Kathy both described, they're going to be, as long as the financial aid applications are completed, the free application for federal student aid being the most common one, the CSS financial aid profile used by some private institutions, around 200 across the country, may also be required. As long as the necessary applications are required and all of the documentation is turned in to be closer to all set, right? Then the college or university is going to determine your eligibility for financial aid from federal sources, state sources, as well as the college and universities grants and scholarships. And that's typically where families see, when they're comparing financial awards, that's typically where they see the biggest discrepancy from one award letter to the next, right? The money that is offered in the form of grants and scholarships directly from the colleges and universities. Kathy, can you talk about, from your experiences, how different colleges and universities make decisions around how much financial aid in the form of grants and scholarships to offer? And how does that work at Berkeley?
So I have worked at a number of institutions and have seen a lot of different methods for packaging financial aid. At Berkeley, because we are a school that is a performing arts institution, every student has to audition and interview and submit transcripts to get admitted. Our money is largely merit-based, so it's based on the audition and the interview, and the student knows about their scholarship when they're admitted. We do have limited need-based aid that would go on top of that, so it's kind of a two-step process at Berkeley. Other institutions I've been at do it, and I feel this is fairly similar to, I think most schools are like this. They look at things like test scores, high school transcripts, extracurriculars, a lot of other things. Sometimes it's geographic region, if the student is coming from far away and they want to diversify the class geographic representation, lots and lots of different things. Some schools will tell you.
Is that what's happened?
Yeah. They're connected to the truck.
Oh, Kathy, I think you're on mute.
How did that happen? Sorry.
Yeah, it's up as high as it'll go, and I can't hear you.
Some schools will tell you that they meet full demonstrated need, meaning that they will take your CSS profile and or FAFSA data and do straight subtraction. They'll look at their cost of attendance minus your ability to contribute, and they will work to meet that need. Some schools tell you that they'll meet a portion of your need. So it very much runs the gamut. And unfortunately, there is no one size fits all answer to that question.
Yeah, but really helpful to understand the different ways in which institutions do put those packages together, specifically their institutional grants and scholarships. And again, that's the reason why all those different policies, having a lot to do with the resources that are available for them to award financial aid. Some institutions with very large endowments that have very generous aid packages, and others that don't. And that's some of the reason why we see some of those discrepancies. As I mentioned, we had a lot of questions around appeal, so we do want to spend some time talking about that. And some family shared circumstances, such as increased medical expenses. Others mentioned how since the applications were completed, or since there has been so much time since the tax information that's used to award financial aid, right? Families who completed the 2024-25 FAFSA or the 25-26 FAFSA are using 2023 tax information, right? And of course, there certainly can be changes, such as a loss of job. What do families do in that situation if there has been a significant change and the information that's supplied on those forms isn't really reflecting their current financial situation? Chelsea, how would you guide families in that situation?
Yeah, this is absolutely a hot topic right now, especially given the time of year with that May 1st decision deadline quickly approaching. So the first thing that you would need to task any institution in which your child is seriously considering, which you think, gee, could we receive any more financial aid, is whether or not they even entertain appeals. Some schools just say, this is our offer, we put our best offer out, and we will not consider appeals. And so you really need to understand whether it's even an option at that institution. Knowing that if you do find out that appeals are entertained at that institution, the next approach would be to determine, because there are two different kind of types of financial aid. There's that merit-based financial aid, which is typically awarded by the admissions office at the time of admission, and then the need-based financial aid, which is determined from looking at that financial aid application, whether they entertain appeals to merit-based aid, need-based aid, or both. And if they do entertain appeals to both, whether that's a singular process that you would go through, or do you need to submit an appeal for one or the other, both separately? And each school is going to choose how they are going to do that. So at Clark University and for other institutions for which I've worked, we actually have a single approach. If a family reaches out to us and says, hey, we'd like to appeal the financial aid award, we ask them a little bit about why. We want to understand what the reasoning is before we point them down the road of going through that process. Some things that schools will consider will be, for example, a merit-based approach would be if the student were to show that they're a stronger candidate now than they were at the time of admission. Maybe that means consistent or better test scores or grades. Maybe they have completed project work or received recognition for something, an award, things of that nature. New information. Certainly an appeal will not be considered on information that was previously provided. And the reason for that is because it has already been considered in the offer that has been made. So schools do not want to receive information that they're already aware of. A need-based financial aid appeal would generally be if there were incorrect information on the financial aid application, if the family's financial circumstances have changed since that application were submitted, or as Joanne mentioned, the financial aid application is looking at income information from 2 years ago, and maybe your financial situation, income information now is quite different than it was 2 years ago. Those might be reasons why you would be eligible to submit an appeal for additional need-based financial aid. So you're going to want to inquire at each institution whether or not they have a process to appeal, what the requirements are, whether it includes merit aid, need-based aid, or both, and then really what that process is. Some schools publicly will put it right out there. You can just do a search of their website and you're going to find their appeal form and you can go ahead and submit it. At other institutions, they're going to do a bit of vetting to find out whether or not an appeal is warranted. And if they are, then they're going to point you in the direction of completing that appeal process. I do want to let you know at many institutions, when a student pays that deposit to say, yes, I'm coming to that institution, that typically represents the students and the family's full understanding of what it is going to cost in order to attend that institution. So you're basically saying with that deposit, I can afford this. And so many schools may not entertain an appeal after that deposit has been paid. I would just like you to please understand that. And certainly after that deposit deadline of May 1st, some schools will not entertain appeals after that time. They've now locked in their budget and they know how much they're spending on each student, and there simply aren't any more resources available. Some questions that I have received at the various institutions for which I've worked is whether or not there's a pot of money, and if maybe some students don't attend, does the money from those students kind of go back into the pot for the students who are attending? That's certainly a school by school basis of how they process aid. But generally speaking, schools are overspending, expecting that a certain number, certain percentage of students will not attend. So when those students don't enroll, there isn't actually more money to go around. They've actually performed a calculation to determine that a certain percentage of students will not enroll so that they're still staying on budget.
That's great. And we did have some questions too about negotiating. Will some colleges entertain more of a negotiation conversation? If, let's say, you've got this really fabulous offer, financial aid offer from another institution, but you have your heart set on this school. Does that happen sometimes? And what do you recommend families do to find out if that's a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question to ask for schools you're seriously considering. One thing that we see working in the financial aid office is we want to remind families that not all institutions are the same. So when you're looking at financial aid award offers and institutions, you're not comparing apples to apples. You're really comparing apples to oranges. So your student might fall at the top of the applicant pool at one institution, the middle at the other, the bottom at the other. And so you're looking at those 3 financial aid award letters and going, I wonder why this I got more merit aid at this school and less at that school, but I'd really like my student really wants to go to this school and they didn't give us as much money. If you're providing an offer of financial assistance as a comparison for another school, many schools will not consider that. There are a few exceptions. I have worked at an institution where they would say we're not considering that. But if you sent it from their direct competition, who truly they did not want to lose students to, then they may very well take that into consideration. So it's definitely a worthwhile question to ask. I just don't want you to think, oh, I got a better offer from another school. We'll just show it to the school my student really wants to attend, and they'll surely match it or they'll surely consider it. That oftentimes is not the case.
Great advice, and also great advice to do this early, right? Before we're making final decisions. Kathy, we're getting a lot of questions about student loans, and some people are surprised to learn that a loan can be offered in the financial aid package. Can you talk a little bit about the types of loans, and specifically like the loans that we see here on the screen in the sample financial aid award that are often included in the aid package? Why are they considered financial aid compared to some of the other, resources that are available for families to pay the bill?
So the loans are included in the package because they're considered self-help. And the philosophy at many institutions is that the student should take advantage of all resources offered to them, and student loans are one of them. In this award letter, this is a loan, this shows this used to be called the Stafford loan back in the day. These are now subsidized and unsubsidized federal direct loans. This is the amount that an incoming first-year student can receive. So the total is $5,500. The first $3,500 that you see, and it's always divided between 2 semesters. So annual totals are divided between fall and spring equally. If your student is attending in the summer, you might want to also talk to the school about what aid may be available in summer. So what you see here, this $3,500 is considered a subsidized loan. That's based on calculated financial needs. So cost of attendance minus student, I don't even know what it stands for, SAI, which used to call the estimated family contribution, the student aid index, minus other resources is financial need. $3,500 of up to $3,500 can be in a subsidized loan. The reason that loan is so attractive is because no interest accrues on that loan during enrollment and then up to 6 months after the student either stops going to school or graduates. The rest of it can be unsubsidized, meaning that it's another $2,000, and the interest does accrue on this loan while the student's enrolled. They can choose to pay the interest or have it accumulated off to the side and have it added back into the balance at graduation. But these are considered self-help. Some schools have a policy of no loans. I think you've heard a little bit about that lately, where certain schools are saying if you make under this threshold, your aid package will not have loans. I think student loans personally these are not the scary loans. These are loans that a student may need to borrow in order to help meet some of their expenses. If a student borrows the maximum during their enrollment, they'll come out with about $20,000 in debt, which is completely manageable. So that's what you're seeing here on this award letter. And the amount increases up to $6,500 for second-year students and then $7,500 for juniors and seniors.
And so that is one of those automatic, as Chelsea recommended before, just like costs do tend to increase, tuition especially tends to increase, could be 3 to 5% every year. What are some of those changes, or can we expect to see any financial aid increases? One of those likely guaranteed increases are the ability to borrow a little bit additional in the federal student loans each year for students. So that does help to offset some of those additional costs.
And it's in the student's name entirely, so the parent is not responsible for it whatsoever. It helps to build their credit. I met with a student earlier today, and she had some questions about the loans she had taken out. So we walked through, what it'll look like when she graduates, if she's on the same trajectory. And she was pretty comfortable with it.
That's so great to hear. And it's such an important point to remember, because those of us who have worked in financial aid don't just award financial aid. We're counselors, and we talk to families about borrowing and smart borrowing decisions all the time, and also help plan ahead for repayment. So don't feel like you can't rely on the financial aid office for guidance around that. I know from my experience, if families are considering borrowing anything to help meet college expenses, the advice is typically tap into that federal student loan eligibility first, because rates are fixed for the life of the loan. Each year you borrow, they do reset rates, but then it's fixed for the life of the loan. And they do come with typically very generous repayment options. There were a lot of questions that came in earlier about the changes that could potentially be happening within federal student aid. We don't have a lot of answers now, but we are at CollegeWell, and of course our member colleges and universities, and Kathy and Chelsea and all the financial aid administrators that we are close with are watching this very, very closely and answering questions as they come in. So as we continue to learn things, we will be making sure that our audience is up to date with all of the information. So far, we are moving forward as planned, and there have been no changes to the federal student loans that students and parents can tap into. But as we said, we are paying very, very close attention to any changes, and we'll make sure to share that with our audiences as changes occur. I want to jump into, now that we've talked about the components, how we pull all of this together. So you've seen some of these images on the previous slide. We started with costs, and then we worked in the different financial aid, types of financial aid and sources of financial aid that you typically see on these award letters. What you're walking through here, couldn't paste it as one screenshot and fit on the screen, so I had to separate it a little bit. But this is how a sample award letter, an award letter recommended that all colleges and universities adopt. This is kind of the flow or the outline of what they recommend to really help families calculate the net cost, which doesn't include that self-help or loans and work study first. It's really about comparing just the free money in terms of grants and scholarships first across the board. So Chelsea, there are all sorts of different ways that you could potentially do this. How do you recommend families get started if they have 3 or 5 or 10 award letters next to them? What's the best approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this looks very much like Clark University's financial aid award letter, where we break it down with our cost of attendance at the top of the award letter. And then we'll show you what the free money is, so that grant and scholarship aid that does not need to be repaid, what the net price will be once that free money has been applied. And then that next section, as you can see there on the right, where it says loans and self-help aid. So it'll say, okay, and now if you choose to accept these loans, this is what the net price will be. And then you'll typically see that right there at the bottom. If the student has been awarded federal work study, that does not reduce the net price. Federal work study does not get applied to the bill, and it often just represents an opportunity for the student to find a job, work, and earn up to the amount that is awarded. Certainly, that money earned from work can be used to help pay those indirect out-of-pocket expenses moving forward. But please know that federal work study does not get deducted from the bill. Performing the calculation of what the net price is for each institution, both after grants and scholarships are applied and then after loans are applied, if the student plans on accepting those loans, is a really worthwhile exercise to go through. Simply looking at that college's costs or looking at a financial aid award independent of the cost of the college isn't going to give you enough information. You may actually find that there's an institution that has a cost of attendance that is quite high, and yet the financial aid that is being offered makes it an affordable option. So we never want a family to rule out a school that has an expensive cost of attendance before really understanding what that net cost will be to them after the financial aid award is applied. Because sometimes that is the most reasonably priced school for that family to select. So, we always say a spreadsheet is wonderful. And if you want to take these financial aid award letters, which hopefully come to you in a very similar format as the one you see here on the screen, and figure out what those net price are, and then say, okay, this is how much this is going to cost. I did also see here, and there were some questions in the chat regarding payment plans. Are payment plans available? How do those work? Certainly, that is an option for paying any balance in addition to loans that a student or parent may borrow or a lump sum payment. But yes, payment plans are certainly an option for paying any balance due. They typically come in either 3, 4, or 5-month payment plans, depending on the month in which the payment plan is started. Some schools will run a payment plan by semester, some will run them by academic year, but there's typically an enrollment fee of about $50, and then the payments made on the payment plan are interest-free. So really any amount that you're able to make in a lump sum payment or on a payment plan is certainly going to help delay or reduce borrowing that you have in the future, which will save you some money. But again, I would encourage you to look at the net price of each institution, not the cost of attendance, but the net price after the financial aid award has been applied in order to determine which is really the most affordable option for you.
Such great advice. And don't rule out a college because of its sticker price. It's true that on average, private colleges do award more financial aid than public colleges and universities, sometimes as much as 3 times the amount. And so when you are comparing that net cost, they can be more affordable options. But you don't know that until you have the award letter in hand. So planning to apply to a balanced list of colleges based on that sticker price with the cost is also a really great strategy, just to make sure that you have options in the spring of the senior year. Now, Kathy, we do have families that are planning ahead. Really quickly, what kind of tools can they use? They don't have these award letters yet, and we're talking about this year's cost. So what are some tools that they can use to be planning well in advance?
So that is an awesome question, because it's really important to start thinking about college costs ahead of time. You don't want to be in your child's senior year and not have had this conversation about what you think might be affordable. So for for all institutions, you can find something called the net price calculator, where you can put in your information. Some high level, some of them are very high level, some of them are very detailed. You can put in things that the school would consider for awarding financial aid, such as, projected SAT scores, GPA, some extracurriculars, put in the financial information, and you'll get a ballpark estimate of what it might cost for your child to go to that institution. So it is a very good tool to start planning ahead of time. I do want to just jump back real quick to the payment plans. I love payment plans. They're such a good tool for families. Oh, look at that. Here we are. Thank you. Yes, I segued.
Perfect transition.
But payment plans are something you pay monthly, right? So when I talk to families, it's like, well, your child is out of the house. What are you saving by that child not being in the house? Are you like, I have a teenage boy, so my grocery bill has been cut in half, right? So I can pay a little bit toward his balance. We do a semester by semester payment plan, so I can pay a few $100s a month. It doesn't sound like a lot, but over the course of 4 years, it adds up. And that reduces overall borrowing for the family. So that would be your present income payment plan. And every school does offer them. And I think it's a great tool for families. Yeah.
Big fan of payment. I think all 3 of us are big fan of payment plans. And I think in talking with families and helping families with this process, they often don't understand that they can use multiple strategies to meet the bill, right? It doesn't have to be all loans. It doesn't have to be all in a payment plan. And you don't have to exhaust all of your savings either. And you want to factor in current conditions too when you're putting this plan together. So first, start with the past and present income. What do you have available to you in savings? Do you have a 529 saving and investing plan? Do you have a prepaid 529 plan? Have you prepaid tuition either through your a state plan that offers? There are a handful of states that offer a prepaid plan for state public colleges and universities. There are under 10 states that continue to offer those today. And then, of course, there's Private College 529 that we mentioned, that is the nationwide prepaid plan, where you can lock in tuition rates at about 300, close to 300 private colleges and universities across the country. Look to see what you have available for resources that you can use first, and then decide, okay, how much am I able to afford in a monthly payment? Is it $500? Is it $200? Is it $500? Whatever you can put toward that in that payment plan, or take from savings or current cash flow, is going to reduce the amount that you have to borrow. And we just want to reiterate the advice that we gave before, that if you do have to borrow, take full advantage of the federal loans that are offered first. Rates do reset every year. We had a couple questions come in about rates. The rates for the student loans this year, and this is through June. So starting July, they are going to reset. Through June, interest rates of students borrowing 6.53%. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen, but loans that you borrow next year will be assessed at a different rate and then locked at that rate for life. Whereas some of the private student loans do have variable interest rates, and some of those may not be capped. So you want to be really careful about reviewing all of those terms before you sign on the dotted line, and again, as you're making up the plan. We did have a question too about Private College 529 for those who may be attending a member, or who are believe their child is going to be attending one of the close to 300 private schools that participate. You can lock in tuition and fees at this year's rates for those institutions. There is a 36-month hold on that. So if you're starting and contributing to your account this year, it's 36 months from when you contribute. So for parents of high school seniors, you can lock in this year's rates to use for the senior year of college. Even though you're just starting now, that still can save you, depending on how much you contribute, a lot of money in the senior year. That locked-in tuition is guaranteed by our participating colleges and universities. So you can almost kind of think about it, again, depending on how much you lock in, as a guaranteed scholarship in the senior year of college. Folks who are who are in the junior year, sophomore, or freshman year of high school have a little more time, and they could, if they wanted to, lock in more tuition and use that for more years, because they have more time to allow that 36-month hold to pass. But speaking of outside resources to help meet the bill, scholarships is a big one. I want to end there in talking about additional free resources, because this is the financial plan. Once we know what the balance is due, and we're putting a plan together considering all of our resources, but there could be some additional outside resources too, to help us reduce some of those expenses. Kathy and Chelsea, what are some of the best places for families to turn to? In my mind, it's always been those local scholarships, because it's a smaller applicant pool. Chelsea, let's start with you. Where do you recommend families turn?
Yeah, absolutely. Inquiring at the high school's college counseling office is always a good place to start, as well as any agencies or associations that families, parents are affiliated with, even parents' employers. Sometimes students can even find scholarships through part-time jobs or agencies in their town. I know that is in my town as well. And looking outside of kind of those local kind of connected personal places, you can always do a search online. There are some reputable search engines out there. Please know, for any one of those, do not pay a fee to have an agency look for scholarships for you. There are plenty of free resources. I know in the state of Massachusetts, we have a nonprofit agency called MIFA, which is the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. They have a scholarship search resource. You should never be paying someone else to find these scholarships for you. That would really be a red flag to me. And a lot of institutions, if you go onto their financial aid webpage, they'll often have some resources that they say, these are reputable. If you're looking for a place to start here. That being said, many scholarships for students who are graduating from high school now, their application deadlines are the winter or early spring because they want to tell the students upon high school graduation if they're receiving these scholarships. So if you haven't started that scholarship search process at this point, I am encouraging you to get on it immediately.
Great advice, and something you can continue throughout college, right? Don't just stop at graduation in the senior year. Kathy, we have just a couple of minutes left. Any additional resources that you would recommend for searching for outside scholarships?
Go potty, come on.
So I think that Chelsea hit the big ones. I definitely feel like you need to get to know your guidance counselor a little bit because they are a tremendous resource. At Berkeley, what we see is students bringing in a lot of outside assistance from their civic organizations or from like performing companies that they've been a part of. So that is a really excellent resource. I did want to get back to this particular slide though, Joanne, because it is talking about past, present, and future. One of the things we like to tell families is that the way you pay for college one year may not be the same each year, right? So just know that you may change the way that you decide to pay year in and year out. And you can, I saw a few questions about when do I use a 529, when to use it when you want to, right? It doesn't mean you don't have to split it between all 4 years, assuming a 4-year education. It can change, something, you can change it from year to year. So just please bear that in mind. In terms of, outside resources, we recommend several scholarship search engines as well. The College Board has a good one. We do recommend MIFA as well. And we list outside scholarships from organizations that support performing arts. So check the individual college's website because they may have college specific scholarships available.
Great, really great point. And then to your point, in terms of using the 529 funds, you do not have to use those in the first year. And factoring in market conditions is a really important factor when deciding when to use your 529 plan. It also might be a great time to bring in a financial advisor that you're working with, because how and when you use your 529 funds can potentially have tax implications as well, and you want to be planning in associated with those specific nuances. I want to ask Kathy, with 1 minute each, Kathy and Chelsea, each one final question. What is the one last thing that you want to leave families with tonight in terms of advice? One last piece of advice for each family that's on, or not necessarily for each family member, but one last piece of advice for family members that have joined us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll take this back to, I used to play soccer competitively, and I remember I had a soccer coach around age 12, and his advice to us was score early and often. So I would say, this is my advice in financial aid. You have a question, I want you to ask it early, and I want you to ask it as often as you need to ask it in order to have a clear understanding of what the finances for college are going to look like in the first year, second year, third year, fourth year. I want you to have that complete financial picture before making a decision about which college your student will attend. And if you can ask those questions early, you're going to give yourself enough time, the gift of time, to have those conversations. I always say to families who reach out to me, even now at the beginning of April, and say, I have this question, but I feel like I'm a little bit late. Actually, no, I'm really glad you're asking it now and not in August, after the fall semester bill is past due and you have no idea how you're going to pay for this. Please ask me now and give yourself that gift of time.
Wonderful advice. Kathy, any last words and advice?
So yeah, a few actually. Parents, talk to your kids now about what's feasible for the family. Don't let the stars in their eyes get in the way of what is realistic financially. I have been on this side of the table for a long time and have seen, families that really struggle to put their child through school to their own detriment. So please talk to your kids ahead of time before they, fall in love with somewhere that is just kind of outside of the budget. But the second piece of advice is ask the specific college your questions. So what is true at Clark University is probably very different at Berkeley, right? So the school is the authority. If you have questions, you want to know a specific policy, how appeals are handled, how best to submit an appeal, what is your policy on changing aid year to year? Does it go up? Does it go down? Is it the same for every year? The institution is the final answer on that one. So those are my two pieces for you.
Great advice from both Chelsea and Kathy. And thank you. We are at time. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight and for submitting all of your great questions. It was hard to keep up with all of them, but I hopefully we did address most of the questions that came in through the chat. But again, thank you so much to everybody for joining us. And a special thanks to Chelsea and Kathy for sharing their expertise.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, CollegeWell, for sponsoring tonight. Thank you, Kathy and Chelsea. So many great pieces of advice, answering questions. I got a lot of questions here. The most frequent question is, yes, you will get the recording tomorrow. So don't worry. You can watch this again. You could share it with somebody else. And please watch it again because there was a lot of great information. And I love, Chelsea, your piece of advice of what was it? Say it again.
Early and often.
Early
Yes.
and often. So that was really good. I'm going to remember that one in a lot of parts of life, but
That's right. It applies to a lot of things. That's right.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joanne, Kathy, and Chelsea. And we'll see everybody again soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.